Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, John, we're back again this week, and we're going to go ahead and kick off the show with a little discussion about the second week of high school basketball. I know it's 2021. Usually we're 2 months deep into the high school, almost 2 months deep into the high school basketball season, but not this year. This year we're on week 2. And let's go ahead and start off with Barren County. We'll talk about the Trojans first because it was a good week in certain ways on the court for Barren County's basketball teams and a bad week in other ways. And it all started on last Monday night whenever these Trojans won in overtime at Russell County, but they lost Aiden Eichen in the second quarter, and it turns out it was a knee injury that I guess will sideline him for the rest of the season. I'm not 100% certain about that, but that's what it seems. And the upside of the situation for the team as a whole is that they won that game, then they went on the road at Ohio County and won the next night. And then they finished off the week with a game at Allen County Scottsville. Played scrappy against a team that without Aiden Eichen, you would have to put the Patriots as the top team in the district now. So they played scrappy against the Patriots. Ended up dropping that game. But it's kind of one of those things that happens, I think, in sports sometimes. Whenever your star player goes down and that kind of thing, everybody kind of rallies around. And they're able to, do things as individuals that they weren't doing previously, or they were capable of, but it just wasn't working for them. But over the course of the season, it's not something that goes in your favor, John.
No, you're never, ever as good when you lose your best player.
Yeah,
and Aiden was not only our best player, but I'd say outside of Isaiah Mason, arguably the second best player in the region.
Yeah.
And was averaging 20 points a game. Mm-hmm. Just athletic, great rebounder, and I feel bad for him. He is a junior, so he should be able to return next year. But that's a tough loss because he's not only a very good basketball player, but he's a good soccer player. Mm-hmm. And just personally, I feel bad for him. And it clearly hurts the team, and I think what you said was right. Short term, I thought the guys did a pretty good job of handling that. Long term, it'll be a major adjustment,
right,
for the team. The good news is some of the players absent Aiden stepped up, and I thought had a good week. It was. Tay Pointer played really well. He was in double figures all 3 games. Had 16 against Russell, 19 against Ohio and County, and I think he had 11 against Allen and shot the 3 well. And he's our best shooter. He's, Tay has been inconsistent at times shooting it his first couple of years, but he looks like to me he's playing with more confidence, and that's a good sign. Aiden Miller, I think, is going to be a kid that's going to have to fill a big void. Aiden's about a 6'3" sophomore, really good athlete, strong kid, and left-handed, which I really like. He plays that 4 position, and he was in double figures 2 of those games. So he had 12 against Russell and 12 against Ohio County, and I think Aiden will finish up this year really, really strong. I really like his game, and that's the one thing when you lose a top player. It just takes more players. It's an opportunity for others, and some of the other players will just have to step up a bit. It's the bottom line, and maybe in a weird way the pressure's off in a lot of ways because. Without Aiden, I think people's expectations now have probably dropped a little bit, and that may take some of the pressure off, and you just kind of go out there and play, and, you just kind of say, let's do the best we can. And Barren has several young kids, several sophomores who will probably get more playing time now.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Aiden Miller, also Eli Brooks.
That's a sophomore.
He's a 6'6" kid. So the thing You mentioned the rebounding part for Aiden Niken, and that's the thing that the Trojans were already having a little bit of a struggle with, just getting on the boards. And so that's one of the places, not just the scoring, that they really have to find some people to fill that gap. And those are a couple of guys that probably have to.
Yeah, and Corbin Murphy is going to get more
Corbin
playing
Murphy.
time and things like that. The guards need to rebound a little bit better. But rebounding has not been an issue the last couple of years. We've actually had good rebounding. It's I still think the ability to put the ball in a basket and make outside shots. And what Aiden did, Aiden gave the Trojans that one go-to player that if you needed a shot, he could get a shot off.
Yeah.
And now it's probably going to have to be, it's be a more of a balanced attack. But I hate it for them, but they're 3-3 and had a good week, and they have Hart County tonight.
Yep. Meanwhile, the Glasgow Scotties, they opened the week last week with a win at Russellville, and that was in the All-A tournament. That was on Monday. Then they played at Metcalfe County in kind of a wild game in a lot of ways, just a lot of points on the board.
Lost in overtime. And look, Metcalfe has they have good basketball players, and Glasgow has good basketball players. Neither one of them has just a single dominant player, like we were just discussing with Aiden Niken there for a team. But so both of them rely on a lot of teamwork. But, and then the Scotties came back on Saturday night, beat Warren East. I think that's Warren East's second game. Their first game was against Bowling Green, I believe it was. And so 77-60.
Yeah, 77-60. And they were up by 20 there. They gave up a few points right at the end. And, one of the things they did better in that game than they did against Metcalfe is they just played better defense. And that was the bottom line. I mean, closed out on shooters, did a better job on the board. Warren East, I don't know whether or not Warren East is as good as Metcalfe. You would look at the scores right now and say they're not, but as I just mentioned, that was their second game, so we have no idea. And I think two of their starters were still out for Warren East, so they didn't even play two of their starters. So they're probably a better team than that score would indicate. But the Scotties, they lost so many players. But going back to what we were talking about, they had these juniors they're juniors now who played behind those 7 seniors last year, and their only senior, Ethan Harlow, hurt his hand in practice and hadn't even been able to play so far this year. So they're piecing it together and using a bunch of different younger guys and actually probably playing better than people would have expected, John.
Well, they've been competitive for sure. They're 2-3 and been competitive, and they've gotten really good play from Sam Bowling. Now, Sam played a lot. He didn't play a lot, but he was
he ended up playing a lot because Tucker Kirkpatrick got hurt last year.
He did, and he's about 6'4", 6'5", good athlete. He's at one time he was averaging like 21, 22 points a game. Jackson Poland has played well. Brennan Short, I believe.
Yeah,
and
he's really come around in these last games. He's been a lot. He was a spot-up shooter, but now he's a guy who's getting on the boards and handling the ball a little more, that kind of thing.
So, Glasgow has proved they're not going to be a pushover,
right?
And so you would think that's the type of team that should get better too, because it's really their first year for a lot of them in terms of major varsity minutes. Mm-hmm. So, from the Glasgow perspective, I would think they would be fairly pleased with the start that they've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they also shoot the ball pretty well. And just about everybody on the floor can handle the ball for them effectively.
That's always a good quality.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't generally see that in a high school basketball team. So that is one of the things that's pretty impressive about them. Meanwhile, on the girls' side, we mentioned it was a good week / bad week for both Barren County teams, of course. The Trojanettes played a great game against the number 8 team in the state, Elizabethtown, lost 51-50. But in the final seconds of that game, they also lost Macy Lockhart to a knee injury. She's out for the season. And I thought when they turned around and played Friday night against Allen County, they ended up winning the game 40-25. But I thought her absence, especially on the boards and scoring inside, that kind of thing, was immediate in that game.
Well, that's another tough loss. And, Macy, I think you could argue she was probably the sixth man last year, so she had great experience last year as a freshman. She's a sophomore, and she's been in double figures every single game this year. Mm-hmm. And she actually had 16 leading score against E-Town, so she got hurt with about 8 seconds left in the game.
Right.
I feel terrible for her. Her mother, Amanda Galloway, was on my first regional championship team back in 1997. Mm-hmm. So I'm very, very fond of the family, and I hate it for Macy because she had improved so much. And it's a tough loss for the Trojanettes because she is one of their better players for sure, and that will again, when you start losing players, it's not you're never quite as good as you could have been.
Right.
I think the good news for Barren though is they do have a fairly deep bench right now, and they've got players who are going to get an opportunity and. To step up basically. Abby Varney is a freshman who's moved into the lineup, and she's played well. I mean, she had 11, I think, against E-Town.
Yeah, she had a good game against.
She had a good game, and they've got some other young kids, 2 8th graders, Katie Geralds, Caitlin Elmore, who've played every game. Mm-hmm. So, obviously you have Raven Ennis and Katie Murphy back.
Right.
So, Barren. One of the thing that makes Barren really good is they have a rather deep team. Addison London came out of nowhere. She's a junior, probably their best shooter, her and Raven Ennis. And Barron's 4-1, did not play well against Allen County. I mean, I think it's only 15-15 at half, but they finally got it together in the last quarter against ACS and win 40-25. And I think it was a little bit of coming off the E-Town game, coming off the Macy Lockhart injury, and Piper knows what she's doing, and she'll kind of figure out the rotation and so forth. But I just hate it. I hate it for Aiden and the boys, just like last year. I hate it for Kirkpatrick.
Yeah,
I hate it for Macy because these kids put a lot of time into it and a lot of work, and these ACL injuries they are so much better now at getting these players back.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be a year and a half. Now they can come back between 6 and 9 months, but the rehab is it's a tough rehab.
Yeah, it's very grueling. One of the things I think that happened with that Allen County game, which Piper talked about this after the E-Town game with Jay Turner, was that it's always a grind against Allen County. And even though, without question, right now, the Barren County Trojanettes are better than the Allen County Scottsville Lady Patriots, just across the board in every position. One of Allen County's best players, Chloe Cook, has not played yet this season. I don't know why that is, but she's not played. That obviously has an effect on them. But what Allen did was they stood in that 2-3 zone, and Barren just didn't shoot the ball very well and didn't attack it very well in the first half.
And that happens. And most of the time, these district games, because players know each other so well,
yeah, they
tend to be closer. That's why I was surprised when Barren blew out Monroe.
Right.
That game wasn't even close. So those games tend to be a little bit closer. But Barren is 4-1, and you got to put them as the number one team in the region right now with their win over Bowling Green. Now, does it stay that way? I mean, they take a step back with Macy being out. But Bowling Green has several players out.
Yeah.
And, that's why it's hard to predict this year what's going on. You got COVID. It could hit a team at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And when it hits you, not only are you shut down, you don't even practice.
Yeah.
So you got that factor in, and it's just hard to predict because of injuries.
Right.
I mean, injuries are part of it, unfortunately. And when I said back in the fall, I guess, that Bowling Green and girls was a heavy favorite to win, I didn't know they had already had a transfer, and Shelton, their other Division I player, had left. I didn't know that, and then when we played them, I didn't know that their point guard was injured, and so injuries are things that are always lurking, and you'd like to make it through the year without it, and then you throw COVID in this year,
right?
And you only. I hate to predict more than 1 week in advance sometimes.
Well, we don't do much in the prediction business here. That's why we mostly review what happened last week, because right now it'd be hard to predict anything.
That's right.
But I will tell you this. The Glasgow Lady Scotties have impressed me in terms of their tenacity. I saw their first game against Greenwood, and I think I had mentioned this to you in the first half of that game. Ansley Adwell's the only player back, really, Mia Cassidy got playing time, but she was a spot player to come in and shoot the ball, that kind of thing, a lot of times last year. So she does have some experience. You know, a couple of the other younger kids got a little bit of playing time when Glasgow had a big lead or things of that nature. But predominantly speaking, Ainsley Adwell is the only player with real experience back. She is a Division I signee with Bellarmine, as you've mentioned with others. And, you know, so there's probably a lot expected of her this year. But in that first half against Greenwood, it looked like the rest of the players on the team weren't sure they should even be out there. You know, they looked obviously uncomfortable. They came back in the second half against Greenwood. They were scrappy, got back in that game, had a chance really to tie it up, but Ainsley had gone out with a cramp, I think it was, and so they didn't get that opportunity. They turned it over. But since then, they've played pretty well overall. They also beat Russellville last week in All-A. Played a 4 overtime game against Metcalf, which was just a barn burner all the way through.
Let's mention that one. That was 83-79,
yes.
4 overtimes, and I listened to some of that game on the radio, and it sounded like a classic at the time. Of course, TJ Coffey, of course.
Yeah, I remember her married name.
Yeah, TJ Thomas, when she played for me, is the head coach at Metcalf, so I kind of keep up with them as well, and Adwell, Ainsley had a great game. She had 31 points and I think 22 rebounds.
Yeah.
And Mia Cassidy had 19 points, and she had 6 threes.
Yeah,
I think she's shooting like 47% from 3 right now.
Yeah, she's shooting the lights out, and she hit a 3 to send one of the overtimes.
Yeah, sure did.
I'm not sure which one.
She did. That was like the second overtime or whatever. So, you know, and Metcalf has one of the better teams coming back. They can really score. So that was I guess you can say a quality loss. You don't want to lose them, but, you know, even if you lose in a Class A, you still play the next night. You know, you're not eliminated. And then they got a great win Saturday night against East. Mm-hmm. And most people felt like that Warren East was the number 2 or 3 team coming into the year.
Right.
You know, they started off with COVID, so, you know, I'm not for sure where they're at right now. But regardless, for Glasgow to get a win 55-53 is a big-time win for them. And how they got it was amazing. Adwell, I mean, actually, Glasgow controlled the game. They led, I would say, 30 out of the 32 minutes.
Yeah.
And then they lost the lead late, and Adwell got
missed some foul shots. Let East get back to with that.
And, you know, there was a technical, and you know, there's a lot of strange things went on. But
yeah, there were.
But Adwell got the steal with on an inbounds play with about 4 seconds to go, and you know, you don't really count on down one getting a steal and then making a shot and fouled. And give her credit, she did, and that was a big win for Glasgow. They're looking at 3-2, and I think the Glasgow girls, you can give them credit. I think they're probably playing better than a lot of people's expectations.
Yeah, they're another team that actually shoots the ball pretty well from outside, and their biggest problem is just they don't have a whole lot of size outside of Ainsley. You know,
right.
She's like 5'11", I think. So she's having to do a lot of work inside, which is not what she's usually done.
The good news is there's not a lot of teams that have size either.
That's true. That's very true. So, yeah, that was a good win for them, and, you know, they have a busy week in front of them, I guess.
I think they're off this week.
Oh, that's right. They are. They had some games that ended up not being scheduled for this week.
Unless they pick up a game, I think they're off for an entire week.
Yeah. Well, maybe they need a break after the last week. I mean, they basically played 4 games instead of 3, you know, when you factor in 4 overtimes.
Speaking of games, Barren and Hart is tonight. Should be a real good girls game.
Yeah.
Hart's got some really good guards. Mm-hmm. And so that is at 6 o'clock, and then the boys follow.
Yeah, and you can hear those games on Nash 103.7 and on 104thescore.com. You can go on there, go to the Barren County page. At the top is the link to listen to it online. So you can hear it on the radio, or you can listen to it on your phone if you want to do it that way.
There you go. And because I think it's if you're coming tonight, you've got to have a pass.
Yeah. Yeah, they are still – it's still pretty tight in terms of actually getting in the game.
Maybe limited tickets, but I think you need to call in advance.
Yep. All right, it's Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, just like the NCAA tournament, when they have that first round, the first the first couple of rounds or whatever on that first weekend of basketball of the NCAA tournament. Those games are usually a lot of fun to watch. They're a lot of fun games to watch. They're very entertaining. But then after that, the NCAA tournament kind of drops off a lot of times. We have some lopsided games. Things aren't as exciting. It's the way I kind of see it. I kind of felt like the NFL playoffs kind of fit that same pattern. That first weekend of 6 games, most of them were, all of them but one, I think, were fun games to watch. This past weekend, they were a slog fest. I mean, there was no real good offense.
Well, I think part of it, Buffalo and Baltimore was hampered by the wind. The wind was atrocious.
Yeah, it was obvious that it was causing real problems.
Was swirling 20, 30. I mean, you had great kickers. Justin Tucker for Baltimore is an incredible kicker.
Yeah.
He couldn't make one.
Yeah.
And that has to affect the passing game as well. So, I think weather had a whole lot to do with that. Green Bay and the Rams just, offensively are not real good.
Yeah.
Now, Aaron Rodgers is great. So that game just wasn't all that exciting. Of course, Kansas City, Mahomes got hurt.
Yeah. But heck, they weren't – I mean, actually, their offense was
Good. It was good.
The problem if that game was – I thought in the first half, all the things the Browns had done to get there, they threw them all out the window and just asked Baker Mayfield to do. And he played well.
I thought he played well.
Too much.
I thought that game was. I enjoyed that game. Kansas City and Cleveland. I thought it was a good game.
It was. I just thought as I watched the first half of that game, I thought the Browns. Like I said, I think how they got there was Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and making plays. But then again, Nick Chubb dropped like 3 passes in the first half. I mean, he was not good in that game. So if anybody were to look at the quarterback play in that game and have a negative about Baker Mayfield, they'd be off the mark.
Yeah, Baker played well.
He did play well. I just thought the coaching let him down some in that game.
Maybe I don't know. I thought he played. I thought he played pretty well, and they were in the game. Kansas City's just better. That's just and Kansas and Mahomes while he was in there they brought their A game.
Yeah.
So, but Cleveland's got a good future. I really believe that they have a solid future. The disappointing game was Tampa and New Orleans, but if you look back on it, New Orleans has not been explosive offensively for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's mainly because of the quarterback play. I mean, Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback. He just does not have the arm strength anymore.
No, he threw 3 interceptions in the game. And
he can't get the ball down the field, and he has not been able to get the ball down the field. And even when he was hurt, they went to Taysom Hill, who can't throw it down the field either, right. But he can run it. And Tampa Bay just took advantage of it. It was clear to me that Tampa Bay was a better team simply because Drew Brees is just not the level that he used to be.
Yeah.
They would probably have been better. I know this is probably blasphemy with Jameis and Winston in the game because at least he can push the ball down the field.
Hey, he threw a 56-yard touchdown pass.
We did. He was wide open on a flea flicker. That's true. But Tom Brady is 43. I think Brees is 40, 41. But
he's 42. They're a year apart.
But Brady's arm strength is much better, much better than Drew Brees. Of course, Drew Brees is coming off an injury this year in which he had a punctured lung and broke or fractured like 9 ribs.
Yeah.
So I mean that's like being in a car crash. But Brady's an amazing player. I mean you can't tell that he's 42 or 43. I mean he looks 35 or 36. He's got a cannon of an arm, and he doesn't play. Drew Brees looked old. Tom Brady does not.
One of the things two things about both the Browns Chiefs game and the Saints Bucks game. The players that were out or limited probably affected those games as much as anything, because Myles Garrett hardly played for the Browns on the defensive side, and he makes a huge difference, especially in the running game. And I mean, they had that Williams dude ran right through. 18 carries for 89 yards or something like that. But, I mean, he had some big runs. On the Saints side, the plays that they run that Taysom Hill is involved in, especially short yardage plays, he didn't play in that game, and so he wasn't available, and that took away at least some of what they do in terms – now, that doesn't change Drew Brees throwing the ball down the field.
Can't do it.
But I think it does change things you can do otherwise, in terms of like getting him in the game and play short yardage plays.
Yeah, this is not Monday morning quarterback. It's just, for me, I have been out on the Saints for a while. Yeah. They just did not look like to me, because of the quarterback play.
Yeah.
They just did not look like to me the type of team that was going to beat a quality team. They just did not. And I've been consistent on that for the last, 6-7 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just not – they're not explosive enough.
A couple of odd things about them. Michael Thomas has been utterly terrible. He didn't catch a pass yesterday.
He's had a weird year. He's been hurt, but he's also – attitude-wise, totally different than he was the prior to that.
Right. So,
of course, he got paid, too, this year.
Well,
but his attitude has not been great.
No.
Did not catch a pass. Kamara was not very effective yesterday either.
That goes back to what I was with the Taysom Hill factored in. Some of the plays that usually Alvin Kamara gets probably work out of a different kind of offensive plan. In terms of in the passing game and that kind of stuff. Because he ran the ball okay. I mean, I think he had 88 yards rushing for the game, but he didn't, what did he have, 20 yards receiving, something like that?
Something like that.
He caught like one or two passes, but they didn't go for anything. I mean, the Bucs basically said they weren't going to let him beat them. And then Michael Thomas not being a factor is not going to beat them. But, I mean, your point is right. Drew Brees could not throw the ball down the field.
Could not.
And,
And it's not this year, really.
No. I mean, and so – they've, going back to the last 6 or 7 weeks and maybe even longer, the Saints have basically been winning off of their defense. Their defense has been the critical thing for them this year.
And in 2020, that just gets you so far.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it'll get you a 10-3 Super Bowl win, but most times it will not.
It will not. Well, that New England team you're referring to, though, they're offensively, they were good most of the year.
Yeah, and that kind of goes as we look ahead to this week. Well, real quick, you mentioned the Packers game. Mentioned the Bills, so we got the Chiefs and Bills in the AFC. That's pretty much who we expected it to be. We got the Bucs and the Packers in the NFC. I would say the Packers we expected. It could have been anybody on the other side. I mean, I didn't think any of the other teams in the NFC did anything particularly well enough to be the second best team in the NFC. But the Packers were clearly the best team in the NFC, and it just looks to me that. That the thing that the Packers are doing, they're running the ball well, their defense is playing well, Aaron Rodgers is playing well, everything is clicking for them. I really don't give the Bucs much of a chance going to Green Bay.
I think Green Bay would be the, in my mind, is the favorite to win it. I'm not sure they're the best team. I think Kansas City, if Mahomes comes back, he went out with that concussion. We'll see. I still think Kansas City is probably the better team, but I'm pretty confident that Green Bay is going to be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I'm not as confident that Kansas City will be, depending on the health of Mahomes.
Well, even before he went out with what seemed to be a concussion, although there was no clear hit to his head, it was kind of an odd situation.
Well, he got his neck and head bent down, so it's more like a whiplash or whatever. They called it a concussion today.
Really?
Yes.
So I knew he'd gone in the concussion protocol during the game or whatever. But back to that, even before he went out, he had the toe injury, and that was obviously affecting him because he was shorting some throws and you could tell he was laboring some. And no matter what happens, if his toe is in bad shape, I imagine that's going to be tough on him against the Bills, because one of the things the Bills did is their front four played real well against the Ravens. They didn't give up anything. Lamar Jackson didn't play particularly well, but their defensive front played real well and kept him bottled up. And that's not as easy to do with the Chiefs just because they have so many weapons. But if your front four can get some penetration on any quarterback, that's going to cause you problems.
Yeah, I think, I'm more concerned about the concussion. If he's got a bad toe, he'll overcome a toe. But the concussion is a totally different issue. My gut tells me that he'll get cleared and play, but you're one hit away, and they're not going to beat Buffalo, in my opinion, with their backup. So, I think Green Bay again. I think that's the team to beat. That's if I could put a shekel down and be on Green Bay to win it. but they still have 2 games they got to get through too.
Yeah.
And the danger of all that stuff is injuries.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Mahomes is not He may not even play right now.
Right.
So, we'll see. But just the NFL, in my opinion, is the best run league. It's the best television show going of all the sports.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 3-hour event. It may go 3 hours and 5 minutes, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And it's I love me some NFL football.
I will say this. I would rather see a Super Bowl between the Packers and the Chiefs with a healthy Mahomes and a healthy
that'd be
Aaron
great.
Rodgers.
The two best players in football, Mahomes and Rodgers.
Yeah, because I think those are the two best teams overall, because the Bills don't run the ball particularly well without Josh Allen running, and their defense is good, but I just think it'd be more exciting to watch the Packers and the Chiefs.
True, but still a great story. Tampa Bay, Tom Brady coming back, and the Super Bowl is at Tampa Bay.
Yeah, that would be. I have a friend who lives over in the UK who's a big Tampa Bay fan. He would love to see that. I'm sure he'd try to figure out how he could get here for it. But
it's amazing how good Brady is.
Yeah, and
French, the quarterback last year threw over 30 interceptions.
Uh-huh.
And you take mainly one change, and now they're in the NFC Championship.
Yeah.
I mean,
one of the things about the
great
Bucs,
player.
though, he is, and he obviously has raised the professionalism around him, because you can tell that
even
about
of
the
the
team as
coach,
well.
even of the coach,
yes, who's notoriously unprofessional in certain ways. But that team still makes just so many ticky-tack mistakes during the course of a game that they just can't afford to do against Packers. I mean, and that's kind of one of the things that worries me. He plays well enough, but when you look at the Saints and Drew Brees throwing 3 interceptions and the final score's 30-20, and that's still, it was not as a decisive win as it probably should have been.
Well, that's because New Orleans is really good defensively.
Yeah, that's true.
And he took care of the ball. Tampa Bay took care of the ball. They ran it more than they normally do, and I just thought their scheme, their game plan, whether it's how much Brady input there is, but Brady was tremendous at managing the game.
Yeah. Real quick, you were talking about the league and how well it's run and how well they've managed to get things done this year. And in our end of 2020, congratulations to folks. I mentioned how the NBA had done a good job of reminding us that we could play sports, because going back to the MLB, I mean, they had a window of 2 months. They could have been the only game in town, and they managed to squander that at the time. But the NBA is learning now it's a lot harder when you're not in a bubble, and people are flaking out all over the place, and that's part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, and that's still the worry that I have even with the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're not done yet.
We're not done yet, and just a couple COVID cases to some key personnel.
Mm-hmm.
Brady, any of those players, could really, really have a monster impact.
Right. Yeah. So it is living on the sword's edge even now, even though the games are worth watching and that kind of thing. All right. It's Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the college basketball season is still churning along for some. Before we get into talking about these men's games and whatnot, I did want to point out, I think we've now had 3 Power 5 conference women's programs that have shut down for the remainder of the season. I think, was it Vanderbilt that did it today or yesterday? I think so.
Vanderbilt played Kentucky yesterday. In girls. Now, I haven't seen. Did they shut down today? I predicted they would.
I believe they did,
because they haven't acted like they've wanted to play all year. To be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I believe it was Vanderbilt today.
I told my sister this last night, because we were talking, and I predicted. I said I'm surprised Vanderbilt's still playing, because they've had all kinds of issues the last couple of years.
Yeah,
have not been very
shut
good.
Down today.
That doesn't surprise me.
Right.
I mean, they almost beat Kentucky, but Kentucky only had like 7 players available, and Vanderbilt didn't have many more than that. So you got Duke, Virginia. Now, Virginia, here's the recurring thing. Duke was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
They had won 1 game. Virginia had not won a game. They were 0-5. Vanderbilt's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think San Jose or somebody like that also women shut down. So, I just kind of take it with a grain of salt. I mean, it's hard to say one way or the other, but until I see a really good team shut down, you know, it's just like, okay.
It's kind of like this. I mean, it's sort of like we were talking about back during football season. You know, the thing about football is practice is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're only playing football to play the games. I mean, not necessarily, but you're going through that torture of football practice so you can play on Friday nights. If at some point in time the torture just doesn't feel worth it anymore, if certain things just aren't going a certain way, either you're not having fun. Because, I mean, you may love the game and want to play it, but you love it and have fun playing it. Things aren't fun within the program. You're having issues within the program. I mean, in this case, we're talking about the women's basketball, not just football generally. But, you know, you're practicing to play, and you're putting up with so many of these things on the program at the moment so you can play the games, but then you play the games, and they're not particularly fun either. I mean, and generally that's more true if you're not very good than if you are good. So I don't really expect to see any of these programs that are doing well decide not to play or their players decide not to play. But, I mean, I think a lot of people are reckoning with the things that they do and say, is this really worth my time?
It is. Well, you know, when you're 0 and whatever, maybe. But I don't know of one. All these high school kids, they certainly want to play.
Yeah,
because they don't have another chance at it.
Yeah, and I think that is different in the high school level because a lot of people do play because that's what they want to do.
And the NCAA granted everybody another year. See, so
true.
So you know, if you're a senior and you know you're 0-5, and you go, this isn't fun. Well, let's just opt out. We can come back again next year. That's probably all part of what's going on. And I'm sure there's still actual COVID issues too.
Yeah,
but. Are they going to be safer not playing? I don't know. You know, I don't know if they'll be safer not playing either. You know, I look at it that way. I mean, unless they're just going to go into their own bubble and not. So I don't know if it makes – you know, I kind of go both ways on that one.
Well, I don't know that they're safer not playing, but I do think that there's probably at least some level of the college experience that is not being enjoyed that goes along with all of this. You know, and really – I mean, you played college athletics. I mean, it's fun to play, but sometimes some of the things that are that you also have to deal with are not a lot of fun.
Right.
And like I said, I mean, at some point in time, it's not all about fun in life necessarily, but we do the things that we enjoy doing.
But the fun things are also going to expose you as well.
Well, yeah. Well, I just mean like being the isolation of
That's
just
tough.
being within the program.
I agree, and that frees people up, and I understand it.
I mean, you may still be going to classes, or you probably not. You're probably doing them virtually.
Virtual, yeah.
But I mean, just the whatever tensions exist are going to be exacerbated because nobody's having a good time. So
I agree.
Anyway, back to the men's, where no one has opted out of playing that I know of. The WKU Hilltoppers finally won both of the games in their conference schedule. They beat Marshall on Friday and beat them again on Sunday.
Yeah, beat a good Marshall team. Now the difference was one of the differences. This was not a back-to-back deal.
Yeah, they had a day off.
They had a day off, and they played at different venues. One game was at the first game was at Western, and the second one was at Marshall. Mm-hmm. And that's the only team they'll do that with because they're considered in the Conference USA. Marshall and Western are the travel partners.
Right.
They go to Middle Tennessee comes in next weekend, and oddly, Middle is not a travel partner.
Yeah.
So it was a good win. Charles Bassey was tremendous both games. I think he had 27 one game and 24 the other one. Carson Williams finally had, he kind of broke out of it yesterday. He had 16 points and that moves them I think 11-4. So that was obviously a good deal because the Western has a nice little rivalry going with Marshall, and to knock them off twice. Obviously, that's a feather in the Toppers' hat.
Yeah, and on Sunday, they did the thing they've been doing in that second game. They got behind, but then they rallied, and they finally finished it and won 69-67.
Yeah, and got some good play, too. I said Carson Williams, who has struggled most of the year at 16. Kenny Cooper, the transfer, played well. He's really struggled as well, and he had a good ball game. So maybe some positive signs for the Toppers.
Yeah, because, I mean, that's what we were talking about last week is it didn't seem like there was any consistency.
Other than Charles Bassey.
But maybe we're seeing signs of some consistency.
Well, they need Carson Williams to be like he was last year. The problem I think they've faced is that Bassey and Williams, when they play together, there's not a lot of space, not a lot of room, because they kind of occupy the same space.
Yeah, Williams doesn't stretch the floor as a power forward, really.
Not as much, but he did have 2 threes yesterday. But he is more comfortable inside, so they have to figure out a way where they can both play and play effectively together.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Louisville split their games last week. They played Florida State tonight. I kind of wondered that loss at Miami, if that was kind of a gap game in a way. Maybe they were looking ahead to this Florida State game.
Well, I knew they were in trouble when Coach Mack mentioned the day before they went to Miami. He was complaining about the 8:30 at night start in Miami. And anytime I hear a coach complain about a game time or a start before they play, that tells me psychologically they're not in the right spot.
Right.
And they went down there and they got way behind. They made it competitive, lost by 6. So, it's not a great loss to Miami. Tough game tonight, Florida State. Florida State has had Louisville's number the last few years, so they're playing less than 48 hours from their Saturday night game. This game is at home, but that would be a tough game. Florida State's good.
Yeah, Florida State has been maybe to some people surprised. They've been
very under the radar. Good.
Yeah, but they've been one of the best teams in the ACC for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
really.
in the nation as well.
Yeah, I mean, so they've been.
They had probably a legit Final Four team last year, except nobody got a chance to play.
Right. Yeah. They weren't necessarily a favorite, but I would not have been surprised, and maybe nobody would have been if they would have won the national title last year.
Deep, athletic, and so forth.
Yep. Meanwhile, the Kentucky Wildcats went to Alabama. I think this was supposed to be a game to see if they were actually turning the corner, and Alabama beat them like they stole something from them.
Well, no, they lost to Alabama at home.
Oh, yeah, that's right, at home.
They lost by 20. Then they went to Auburn and got beat.
That was the one that was
one of the worst games I've ever watched. I mean, horrendous shooting performance.
Yeah.
And now all that good karma that Kentucky had when they kind of got that
one beat Florida, looked like they had figured some things out.
Won 3 in a row, and now back to the drawing board, and now it looks like, again, Cal doesn't know who to play. I mean, I'll sit there and watch them play Auburn, in which the shooting was horrendous, and the only one that could really make shots at all in the first half was, again, the Kentucky kid.
Yeah, Dante Allen.
And he proceeds to only play about 22 total minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just very confusing. He continues to play B.J. Boston, who's just not playing very well at all. I mean, I think he had more turnovers than points. And Kentucky just looks completely lost as a team. They don't shoot it well. They don't pass it well. They can defend a little bit, but Cal looks lost. He really, to me, doesn't look like he knows who to play and how much to play them. And again, can they turn around? Whether they're talented enough to win games, are they talented enough to win a lot in a row? To me, no. It just doesn't. When you rely on freshmen, and like Kentucky has done for since Cal got there, and then your freshmen aren't very good, you're in trouble. Yeah, and that's kind of where they are.
I think today when the AP poll came out, it was the first time since 1961 that North Carolina, Duke, and Kentucky were not in the top 25. And somebody on Twitter pointed out, how's that one and done going? I mean, it's a good question.
Well, North Carolina has not relied on one and done as much as Kentucky and Duke, but Kentucky and Duke have been the one and done kings. You could probably throw Arizona in there a little bit too,
right?
And maybe there has not been a whole lot of real good first-year players the last few years. That's possible. But Duke is another team that has bad karma. Coach K really doesn't want to play. Mm-hmm. He's made it very, very clear that he does not think it's a good time to play. He'd rather push it back. And that mentality, to me, has to kind of seep into their play.
It's kind of what you said about Coach Mack telegraphing by complaining about the time before they went there.
Right.
And sometimes I wonder if coaches, it's not that they're too honest, It's that they're too narrow-sighted in what they feel like the issue is.
Yeah. And, of course, Coach K, he's in his 70s, and he has legitimate concerns.
Oh,
I would be
well,
if his age.
health issues, that kind of thing.
And so's Coach Williams at North Carolina.
Right.
So I'm sure all those are factors, but do I think it carries over to their team? Probably so.
Yeah, because, I mean, if that's what they're saying here in front of the microphone, I mean, that feels like to me that the wrong energy is coming out of them in the locker room as well.
I agree.
And I mean, I think coaches should be honest with their players, but they also have a kind of need to set a certain ground level so that their players don't have to worry about certain things. They take care of those things, and the players can focus on playing. And it feels like this year some of these coaches are getting tied up in the moment more than – because the performance of their teams on the floor seems to indicate that as well.
Yeah, and Cal's been all over the map.
Yeah.
And his team has been that way as well.
Yeah. You know, going back to the WKU thing, that is one thing about Stansbury that I do kind of like, is the way he kind of approaches things. And you can, even when things are inconsistent, he kind of stays on the same message.
Yes, he has. I think they've done a great job.
Yep. All right, it's Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, we made some predictions about the college football championship game. One of the predictions that probably came true was we pointed out that it felt like it was totally overshadowed by the NFL weekend that was before it. And I think before we came back on, you mentioned that it was the lowest rated championship game. Is that correct?
It was. The ratings took a big hit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the lowest, but it was the lowest in a while. And I think part of it is what we said. They put it on a Monday after the triple-header NFL playoffs on Saturday and Sunday, so the build-up for it kind of lost its luster.
Yeah.
I think there's Alabama fatigue, to be quite honest with you.
And probably Ohio State fatigue.
Probably Ohio State. And I think most people thought Alabama was going to blow them out, and they did.
Yeah.
And I thought the game could be more competitive, but I also said last week on the air it depends on the health of Justin Fields and some of the COVID issues on the defensive line Ohio State had. Fields did not look healthy to me, and Alabama just by far they're the most dominant team this year, just like LSU was last year.
Yeah, and I mean, and was it Devontae Smith?
He only played a half, and he had 200 yards and 300. Yeah.
He got hurt, but I mean, Ohio State could not cover him.
And to
all.
be quite honest with you, unless you're an Alabama fan, the game was not that interesting.
Yeah, it really wasn't. You know, because we go back to how Ohio State even ended up in the playoffs to start with. That felt. Look, I think I mentioned it last week. Dabo Swinney probably shouldn't have said it out loud of how he ranked Ohio State.
He spoke for a lot of people.
But he was not wrong. They really should not have been there.
Right.
And the health issues were compounded that situation. They hadn't had to deal with a lot of things that other college football teams had to deal with because their season started so late. So they ended up playing 7 games total. Anyway, yeah, it was a complete beat down by Alabama. I think you're right. I would say there's Alabama fatigue, there's Clemson fatigue, there's Ohio State fatigue, Notre Dame fatigue. There's kind of fatigue with how that playoff works at this point because we see the same team so much.
And I don't blame those schools.
No.
I mean, everybody else needs to step up their game, evidently.
Well,
if it's possible.
Or they need to change what they're doing in order.
Yeah, again, I keep telling you the scholarships.
Yeah, that's right. Meanwhile, today, the Louisville women are the number 1 ranked team in America.
First time in school history.
Yeah.
And Jeff Walls has had 2 teams in the Final Four. Final game, actually. So
Right.
they've made it to number 2, but never could get above either South Carolina or UConn, I believe, in that run. So, number 1 team in the nation, undefeated. And, what I've seen, I think they're really, really good. Are they a dominant like the UConn teams of the past? No. They don't have that dominant player. They got a real good guard.
Yeah.
They got good guard play, but they don't have that dominant Diana Taurasi type of player or anything like that. But they're really good.
Yeah. Yeah, good for them, and good for him too. I mean, because as you mentioned, he's had some very good Louisville basketball teams. So they've just been locked behind those other dominant programs in women's college basketball. And then finally, from our Tennessee fans out there, they fired their football coach today with cause, apparently, because of some recruiting issues.
I tell you what, I think what's sad if you're going to get caught with recruiting violations, then you should at least be. Not be better at recruiting, but you should have better players at least.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you
cheat better?
I mean, at
that was the first thought I had whenever I saw recruiting violations. I was like,
it's like robbing a bank and spending and stealing 2 cents.
$10 bill?
Yeah. I mean, they've got. I mean, it doesn't look like to me they recruited all that well, and they cheated. if what is said is true.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway,
it may not be true. I don't know, but it's alleged true, and they did fire him with cause, which is rare.
Yeah, I was going to say, true or not, Tennessee, the administration of Tennessee believed it and believe they have the evidence because there's going to lawsuit kind of come from that because firing him with cause means they don't have to pay him the rest of his contract, which he just signed a new one. So they are looking to get out of that in a big way and hopefully stave off any NCAA violations or investigations or some such of that matter, I would guess.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck with that. But also, that opens the door. Maybe Hugh Freeze is the next coach at Tennessee, but maybe they don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, he's from Tennessee.
He is from Tennessee.
That's the call I'm making.
I just would not give him a school phone. He can have his own phone, but he won't get one of ours.
Second chances are I'm not against second chances. I mean he was made some serious mistakes at Ole Miss, but second chances, and I wish him the best.
Yeah, I'm not against second chances. I'm also but I am against being stupidly blind to people's past mistakes. All right, that's the show for this week. It's the Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's in Glasgow. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow. Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.